warm welcome to everybody at this edition of Reciprocity Alchemy. I'm Kanchan Satpathy, an architect by profession, and I've designed my life purpose to nurture a world abundant with grace, expression, and respect so that each one of us can feel loved and empowered to live our life to the fullest. And this I do through my expression of building their homes and realizing their dreams with my design and construction company, and through this forum of reciprocity by empowering entrepreneurship. Reciprocity is all about this large-hearted phenomena about giving and adding to the lives of people around us. And we are into the business of impacting each other's lives and businesses favorably for mutual benefit. Alchemy, as we all know, is a seemingly magical process of transformation, creation, and combination. And at Reciprocity Alchemy, our initiative here is to gain a better understanding of the world around us. And the endeavor is to transform our thoughts and understanding to make our minds more open to varied and diverse insights and perspectives from people who are experienced and experts in their respective fields and industries. The topic of alchemy today, as we all know, is self-funding and external funding. Whether a startup or even an existing business, the main goal of our businesses and our companies is to grow. And we are all entrepreneurs, and while some of our businesses we know can grow organically, at some point we wonder and ask ourselves, should we look at getting funding for our businesses to grow it to the next level? And despite the various ways that we can fund our businesses, it is fairly difficult to know and to understand which funding options are available that could really optimize growth potential and lead us to success. So let's find out from our experienced and esteemed panelists today about their views on this topic. I'm now going to be introducing my panelists for Alchemy today. And I will start with Mr. Samir Mathur. And when I say that, I request you to just raise your hand so that everybody can see you. He's the CEO of Roynet Solutions, a fintech solution company providing solutions for the rural sector. Mr. Rajat Jain, founder and director of Padup Ventures, a knowledge and mentoring platform, and also an investor. Mr. Saurabh Sitaram, co-founder and director of Kevinters and Fat Tiger. He is the man who's turned milkshakes into a 100 crore business. Mr. Neeraj Jain, he's the ex-CFO of Johnson & Johnson Medical India and also an investor. Today, I'm going to be supported to moderate this debate by a dynamic young entrepreneur and my colleague, Aditya Singh. Aditya, over to you to take us through this journey of alchemy today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kanchan. Am I audible?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So good morning, everyone. I'm Aditya Singh and I lead BrainPan, a content marketing company. We have recently launched a video production platform called Expedify.com, which is the world's first online platform that enables brands to discover great reference videos, get an instant and accurate quote, and start a project in seconds. Expedify.com is exactly like an Uber for digital videos. We have engaged with over 100 brands and created over 500 high-performing videos for them. It is a pleasure today to host this panel discussion on the topic of self-funding versus external funding. Before we go ahead, here are some meeting guidelines. Number one, please keep your audio on mute unless until you're speaking. Number two, please type your comments, questions, or perspective on the chat window, and we'll try to come back to you on that. Number three, please use the raise your hand feature at Q&A section to ask a question to the panelist. Alternatively, you may also type your question in the chat box. And number four, we will be having 3 polls during the entire session and request you to participate with your opinion. So before we move forward, here is a very small and brief context on the topic of self-funding and external funding and funding in general, right? So funding refers to the money required to start and run a business. It is a financial investment in a company for product development, manufacturing, expansion, sales, and marketing. Many startups choose to not raise funding from third parties and are funded by their founders only to prevent debts and equity dilution. However, most startups do raise funding, especially as they grow larger and scale their operations. If you're an entrepreneur seeking to understand why funding is needed, then today's panel discussion will demystify funding for you. Why is funding required? Types of funding, stages of startups and sources of funding, and how to raise funding. and most importantly, the topic of self-funding versus external funding, their merits and demerits. Moving forward, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Mr. Rajat Jain, in a little bit more detail. Rajat Jain and IIT Delhi and IIM Ahmedabad alum. Rajat Jain is the founder director of Paddock Ventures, a knowledge and mentoring platform focusing on providing deep mentoring and incubation services to early stage tech companies as well as other incubators in India. The primary mission is to impact hundreds of early stage startups through proprietary Paddock programs, leading to improved rates of success and helping them grow successfully to the next level and to institutional funding. After a 30-year career in corporate India and leadership roles, Rajat is now a non-executive director on several boards and advisory boards. Apart from this, his key work areas include mentoring entrepreneurs and executives alike as an angel investor and a startup mentor. Rajat, thank you so much for being here. And before we move forward, a very quick question with you, Rajat. What is a good time for funding for startups, and what are the different options of funding the startup should look at?
Thanks, Aditya, and good morning to all of you. I'm really delighted to be here today. Thanks to Kanchan. There is no specific and accurate answer to when it is the right time for funding. But I guess the primary reason for funding happens when you realize that you need money from outside your own resources to grow the business. I think that's let's say in short, and that time can happen in 6 months in a company's life cycle, or it may never happen, or it may happen after 4 years. But I mean, you mentioned briefly about the kinds of funding. I think it's important to understand at the outset that, what is self-funding, or I would call it internal funding, and what is external funding, and what are the differences. So, typically internal sources of finance would include funds that a business generates itself from its own operations, which could be profits, retained earnings. It could be reserves that you build over a period of time. You could be selling some parts of your business assets. And mostly in the case of startups, it's none of these. It is just the founder's personal savings. So I think it is important to say that when you start a business, perhaps it is always with personal savings. I have seen hundreds of startups in the last several years, and the first question we ask them is, "Bhai, आपने कितना पैसा लगाया?" अगर आपको बाहर से पैसा लेना है, तो जो भी आदमी बाहर से पैसा डाल रहा है, he says, "How much have you put in?" Banks also talk about debt to equity ratio. What is the equity? And equity basically is what the founder or what the business owner has brought in himself. Now, the second option obviously is external funding. And these are fundings that are raised through external means. Obviously, this is debt and equity. Debt includes any kinds of loans or borrowings, from whatever methods you can choose. Small businesses, when I focus on small businesses, it is, small bank borrowing, some working capital loans, some cash credit, all that. That is all kinds of debt. And equity, which is typically what most startups will go for, because raising debt also has challenges of collateral and all that. It is raised by issuing shares to a new shareholder. And I think that can be an angel investor, that can be a venture capital investor, that can be any kind of investor. And again, the initial sources of funding, apart from the founder himself, typically tends to be friends and family. आप जब करने के लिए शुरू करते हो, तो there are people who will want to support you irrespective of what you're doing. And that is you and your friends and family. The moment you go to professional people or investors, they will ask you lots of questions about the business. ठीक है कि नहीं, scale होगा कि नहीं, क्या return आएगा, कितने time में return आएगा. All those questions become important. Either you go to a bank or you go to even an angel investor like me or other people on the panel. I think those questions will come. So I think it's important to understand the key difference between internal and external funding, and of course we'll come to that in a little bit of a minute.
Thank you so much for your perspective, Rajat. And one of the things that really struck out was that, as you said, that investor पूछते हैं कि आपने कितना पैसा लगाया है, and that to me is a very critical thing, because I mean, if you believe in something that you're doing, then you would have invested your own personal money into it. So thank you so much for your perspective.
I think the concept of skin in the game is very key. If you tell somebody कि मैंने 1 लाख रुपया लगाया है और मुझे आपसे 5 करोड़ रुपए चाहिए, then any commonsensical guy will say, यार आपने 1 करोड़ लगा, 1 लाख लगा और 5 करोड़ मांग रहे हो. Whereas if you say कि मैंने 2 करोड़ लगाया है और मुझे 2 करोड़ चाहिए, then that's a debt. That's a ratio of 1:1.
Correct.
So I think when outside people come in, they will ask these questions clearly.
Right.
And I think your funding and your friends and family funding is seen as the risk capital that you have put in.
Correct.
And then the other people follow. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your perspective on this, Rajat. Okay. After this, I'm going to move on to Mr. Sameer Mathur and a very quick introduction of Sameer. Sameer Mathur is the CEO of Roynet Solutions, which is a banking technology firm focused on developing and deploying technology solutions with the objective of enhancing access to financial services to millions of people in rural India. The company also has separate vertical focused on providing low-cost solar lighting solutions for the BOP rural-based customers. Prior to his entrepreneurial foray, he was working as a country manager for HP. Post his stint at HP, he went to the US to do his MBA from the Sloan Business School, MIT, where he worked with a couple of his batchmates to create a business model to address the issue of financial exclusion, which most developing countries globally are grappling with. Sameer, glad to have you here on this panel discussion today. Really looking forward to your perspectives. And the question that I'm asking you, Sameer, is please share your journey on growing Roynet and also share with us your key moments of ups and downs that you faced that would give us key insights and learnings as well.
Yeah, I've actually seen both sides of the world. I've seen the corporate world, and it was at one point of time where I realized that I wanted to do something on my own. In 2010 is when I decided to take a sabbatical and a break. And my first venture was FIA Technologies. And it's interesting, the point I think Rajat raised about the fact that when you first move into this world of raising funds, and you know, the kind of journey you have is pretty tough, because when you're at an ideation phase, a typical investor's approach towards you is very cynical. It's very skeptical. You kind of on a barrage of questions. A lot of it is analytical. And obviously you don't blame the investor, because if I'm an investor too, I'd always be very skeptical of investing in an idea. I'm always very confident if the idea has seen a few customers, idea's got some validation from the marketplace. And that's the biggest learning I've had, both in my first venture and the second, that if you want to raise funds and you want to go to investor, get your first few customers, get your idea validated. That's when your probability of success is going to be higher. So that was the first learning I had, even in FIA, when we took our idea to the first customer and we got a contract from a large bank, was when we approached our investor friends, and that's when we got our first round of funding. And that's how the whole journey began. Then we reached the Series A, and then kind of things became relatively simpler. In Roynet too, Roynet is roughly about a 6-year-old company. The first 3 years was completely bootstrapped, where I put in my own personal funds. And I was also kind of, I also got a few of my friends and family who believed in me. That's the other learning I've had, is that friends and family too, a lot of times do not necessarily invest in the idea. They may not be very knowledgeable about the idea, but they invest in you as a person. And that's the key learning, that even with an investor initially, the first thing he looks at is whom is he investing in. So he looks at whom is investing in, then he looks at the team as to what's the team which you guys have got, because most investors are very skeptical of investing in a one-man show. They like to see a team behind an idea. And third, of course, the business idea itself. We raised our first funding in Roynet only after 3.5 years of, after we had got a few contracts, we had a few million customers. And while we were still in the cash burn phase, but the business idea and model had been tested. So our funding journey began in 2017, and post that we've raised a few series around, few so-called further rounds. And then of course, now the business is profitable, and the approach and perspective which investors have is very different. But a couple of learnings, if you are kind of starting off an idea, I think bootstrapping is possibly one of the most sensible options to look at. I think it's going to be trifle difficult looking at equity. Debt is obviously very difficult. In India, the general joke is that you can get a loan from the bank only when you can convince the bank that you don't need money. So getting debt from a bank today is it's a pretty difficult option. So that'll be my 2 bits worth in terms of an advice to any startup which wants to which wants to look at raising funds, I think first look at figuring out ways to fund the startup on your own. That's the higher probability option. And once you've got your first set of clients and customers, then look at moving on to approaching professional investors.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much for your perspective, Samir. And one of the things that really stood out for me is that when you said that investors are not very, they are very skeptical during the idea phase, and that's the moment when you have to kind of bootstrap, get the proof of concept, get the market validation, and also the thing about who are they investing in? They're investing in you, they're investing in your team, and finally, they're investing in the business idea itself. So thank you so much for your perspective, Samir. Next, I would like to bring in Mr. Neeraj Jain, and a very quick introduction of Neeraj. Neeraj Jain, a rank holder, chartered accountant and company secretary with over 30 years management experience in finance, supply chain and business across diversified industries at J&J and Unilever in positions of increasing responsibility in India, ASEAN and Asia Pacific. Neeraj's key area of expertise includes strategic business partnering, controllership, M&A, recognizing businesses for growth and finance talent development. Till recently, Neeraj was the VP CFO at Johnson & Johnson Medical in India. As an India Management Board member and as a member of the AP Finance Leadership Team at Johnson & Johnson, Neeraj led several strategic initiatives in business, finance, and supply chain. Neeraj brought in the concept of finance business partnering at Johnson & Johnson Medical India. Neeraj was awarded as one of the 100 most influential CFOs in India in 2016 by CLMA. He is a regular speaker at finance, business, and legal events in India and a guest lecturer at MBA schools. Neeraj has a passion for tourism, particularly in wildlife, nature, and amateur photography. Thank you so much for being here, Neeraj. Thank you so much for joining the panel discussion. And the first question that I would be asking you, Neeraj, is what kind of funding options are available for a small and medium enterprise? And also, please share, what do you look for before investing in a business?
Thank you, Aditya, and thank you, Kanchan. I think it's a great subject, very relevant for the day. But I'm going to step back a bit. Whether it is a multinational company I work for, or whether I invest in a company today as an investor, what is most critical to me is the viability of the business. It doesn't matter whether you're a SME, you're a large company, small company, a project in a company, how viable is the business opportunity? So, funding will only follow if business is viable. So the first step is to make a nice, good, detailed business plan. If you don't have it, nobody's going to fund it, whether friends, family, or external investors. Now, assuming that you have a strong and good business plan, the next step is then fund it. And as Rajat said earlier, I think what skin do you have in the game? So what is it that you're putting in? Khud kitna paisa laga rahe ho? That's going to be important. So as an investor, I will always look at how much money is being put in by the team or by the founders. Of course, later on as a comment came from Samir that how good are the founders. So the team behind the startup is going to be as critical. So product, viability, business plan, team, all these are important. And then comes the type of funding. What funding can you do? So there could be equity funding, there could be debt funding. As we discussed, debt funding is quite difficult, and I completely echo that point as well. Equity funding, can be at the ideation stage. There's a question on the chat box already about, you have an idea and you don't have funds, what do you do? So ideation stage funding is most difficult, and that's when you go to the government, get some grants, get your idea, validated, maybe get some mentors and get some funding from friends and family, put some money at least. Yeah. And then have a product. You can put money just before the launch of the product or after the launch and have some revenues, as Samir said earlier. So pre-product, post-product, both are possible. The valuation will keep changing depending on what point of time you're coming in. So if the investment is happening at the ideation stage, you will get money at a higher, at a lower valuation, at a higher cost for you. But if you're going to be coming in later, post-launch, and you have revenues, you'll be better off, because then you will be able to divest less and get more money out of it. So equity funding, from investors like us, angel investors, I think it's good to come to people, to the angels or to VCs in stages. Like, you come initially for some money and then slowly increase your requirements as the business grows. And that's how you get better and better valuations for your business. It can come in equity form. It can come in convertible preference shares form. It can come in some debt form, but debt is discouraged in the beginning. Debt starts making sense when you have positive cash, sustained positive cash for a while. And that's when the debt starts making some sense, because then you know that you can service the debt. If you can't service the debt, there's no point servicing debt from capital. I mean, that's a bad idea. So till your ability to service the debt is not there, the advice is do not touch debt and stay with equity, and equity in stages, as I talked about. So so coming back for an SME or for a startup, I mean, that's the right way to go. And for a large company or an MNC, as I said, it's mostly project based. One point I want to make, if you notice, all the large MNCs, they don't like to take debt. They typically like to do internal. There's a reason behind that, because debt at some stage in life takes you down. I mean, the life of debt, or your life with the debt, is limited. It's not unlimited. It's extremely difficult to sustain only debt funding for a long time. It won't happen. So if you look at Fortune 500 companies, most companies work with very little debt. And that's why they sustain for like decades. So it depends on what stage of the company you are, and that's how you'll plan your funding.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Neeraj, for your perspective. And listening from a CFO of your caliber, I mean, one of the things that really stood out, get your business plan ready, get the product right. The business should be viable. I mean, if these are the check marks, the team should be there. I mean, these are the kind of check marks that you're looking for in a business, and that's the only point that when funding kind of makes sense. And also, very, very, very good word of advice and caution against taking debt, because for debt, as you rightly mentioned, you need to have positive cash flows to actually to be able to repay it off. And equity is generally the way to go about it. Thank you so much for your perspective, Neeraj. Okay. And last but not the least, I would like to introduce Mr. Sohrab Sitaram. Sohrab Sitaram is the co-founder and director of Keventers. He is one of the most recognized names in hospitality industry across India and the Middle East. He has been instrumental in growing Keventers to 340 plus outlets within a span of 3 years, and thus re-establishing Keventers as an iconic milkshake brand. With outlets across India, he has now taken the brand international to cities like Dubai, Nairobi, Kathmandu, with London, Singapore, and Saudi Arabia on the cards. An industry veteran with a career spanning 24 years, with his wealth of experience and diverse interests that extend beyond F&B, he has been a speaker at numerous events, including several TEDx talks. Recently awarded Inspirational Icon of Newshood, the man who turned milkshakes into 100 CR business. An alumnus of the prestigious Indian Institute of Hotel Management, Aurangabad, he spent a large part of his career with the Taj Group Hotels before moving on to set up many award-winning restaurants and bars across India. An innovator at heart, at leisure, Sohrab Sitaram is an avid traveler, springboard diver, golf enthusiast, and a keyboardist in a blues band. Sohrab, so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for giving your time and sharing your perspective with the forum. And my question to you, Sohrab, is how were you able to raise capital to scale Keventers? And if you could share your story of scaling Keventers and a perspective on the ups and downs in the journey.
Sure. So let me start off by saying that Keventers was a very old, iconic, legendary brand that existed.
Yeah.
Today this brand is nearly about 100 years or 100 plus years old, and it was started by Mr. Edward Keventers when he actually came down to India and set up the first factory in Aligarh. That time India didn't have the dairy technology. Post that, Keventers did very well and was bought over by the Dalmia family in the 1940s. Post-independence, Malchamar was the place where the Keventers factory was. But post-independence, Malchamar became a diplomatic zone. So the factory no longer existed. So it shut shop. And by the way, from that time on to the year 2000, there has been no existence of Keventers. 3 friends met, me and 2 others, of course, Agastya and Aman. And we decided to revive, well, you can say revive this brand because the brand had become non-existent. I don't know whether we want to call it start afresh or revive, but yeah. So we decided to take it forward, and we decided that we must. So there were a few things that that we had in mind. Number one, there's a certain stigma or there's a certain association. While there's a lot of trust factor in olden brands which are old or which have existed since, people do think that they are stuck back in time and they may not be relevant. So our first idea was actually to make the brand pretty relevant. And we identified the target market. Genvoy was supposed to be the target market. And we went all out to make sure that the brand became relevant. And there were 2-3 things that we looked at. Whenever we start business, we always believe, and that's the belief of the Dalmia family as well as me whenever I work, that you should do something which is good for the others, which is very, very important. Now, we looked at many so-called successful MNCs, and they've done such a brilliant job. But we looked around, even the QSR industry, everywhere, all we saw is plastic, plastic, and more plastic. And the companies would then come out and say, oh my God, you know what? We made a brilliant plan. So what was the brilliant plan? In the year 2099, 2000, we'll become plastic free, right? So for the life of me and my other partners, we couldn't figure out what is so difficult. Where there's a will, there's a way. And we've always firmly believed that. So we decided to go ahead and do something which is better. And it doesn't matter if the cost is more, but we decided that certainly getting a glass bottle always the facts that, it's far, far better than plastic, healthier, and we're doing something good for people. So that's what we did. So these were some marketing strategies that we actually followed. So in general, if you ask me, the idea was to do something better than what is being done and do something good. So that was one. I also believe that business has to be scaled up. There's no point doing a business. I did many, many restaurants. We did some, when I was younger and I used to play for a band, I decided I must have a nightclub so that I can play with my band there. So that's what we did. But those were just fun days. Those are not scalable products. It was very difficult to scale these kind of places. There's this artist in you which wants to do creative and very, and then there's a businessman who wants to get into mainstream. So there's always this thin line that you're trying to figure out but I decided that I'd done many of the artistic so-called programs. So let me venture out into mainstream, and that's what we did. So scale was paramount in this business and scale is paramount. So that's what we decided, that we'll scale up the project. So we actually looked at a product, everybody talks of a product being highly differentiated. So, for my younger startup friends who want to come into this industry, it's great to have a differentiated product, but it's also very important to have familiarity at the end of the day. If you're looking at the food business, you can do paella, for example, from Spain, or you can do currywurst from Germany. But the thing is it really relevant in our country? So we looked and we decided that we'll do milkshake because there's this nostalgia associated with it. It's also pretty, it's very cool amongst the beverages. And we'll also have the first mover advantage. So that's something that we started off with. Scaling up in India, India is like different countries. In fact, every nook and corner in Delhi becomes another city in itself. And there are many challenges that we realized. So we specifically decided to reach out to the communities. And I always give this example of the Indian Army. Earlier Indian Army was not as patriotic. You could say the soldiers when they were with the British, when it was a part of the British. But the British then created the Sikh regiment. They created, the Grenadiers. They created so many other regiments. And each regiment had its own, own flag, own uniform, own war cry, everything. And things soon changed. And that's something that we've kind of incorporated after getting influence from there. So if you see, we've actually reached out to communities, different communities across India. And, and we did this very simply. It's not so complicated. We looked at the bottle. We said that if the bottle is being, for example, when we launched in Kenya, for example, Nairobi. So the bottle actually, what we had on the bottle was the big five. So we tried to associate the bottle with the different cultures, something that people are proud of. Similarly, when we went to Bangalore, it was more, new age, digital. We also tried to capture different dances and cultures of India when we went to Chennai, so on and so forth here. And we made it, and we were highly influenced by the fridge magnet theory, that whenever a person travels, he likes to collect So soon enough, Keventus became a like a collector's item for bottles. That apart, we always showed India in our strategy, a new India, not India which is stuck in time, not the India full of snake charmers. And so everything was modern, everything was new. And that essentially was the strategy. Funding, yes. So I thought I'll just tell you what was the funding. We decided to go that, look, earlier I've put in a lot of money into most of my ventures, and we've made money some places, we've lost money some places, but until and unless the business is scalable, it doesn't attract people. So we wanted to do a scalable business, but there was limited amount of funds that we could actually put in. So what did we decide to do? We decided that instead of borrowing money, we find that I find it a little complicated to borrow money from friends and family, after all their friends and family are. So I'm somebody who's against this. So we decided that we would put in whatever money, whatever money we could spare into this venture. And going forth, we would look at a franchise model. So what we would do is to raise money, franchise. And we did this very successfully. Franchising has many advantages, and I'm a firm advocator, especially for startups, franchising. Look, when you have your money and you want to expand, it's not very difficult because you've got the money. But to convince others to put in money means that your product has some value, it has its own merits. And that's what we've been able to do. So for us, franchising has really worked out well. We are really proud of the fact that our franchisees are very happy. We've been able to raise the capital that we required. Franchisees are doing well. We're also making sure that in India, young entrepreneurs come up and are able to make a living rather than just working in, for some company. So we've been able to achieve many things. What our vision was that create a business model which is successful for others, help people generate more sources of income, be able to raise funds without much of an issue. And sometimes like everybody spoke about skin in the game. The best part here is not just your skin in the game, but your franchisee, his skin is in the game. So let me assure you, he'll be much more bothered than any manager could be bothered. So this essentially is Keventus for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your perspective, Saurabh. And one of the things that really stood out for me, after hearing all the panelists right now, and especially your point of view, Saurabh, is that, there is not one path towards getting funding or scaling a business. And the path that you took was developing a brand that is very relevant today, that people love, and getting that context of, the culture and those icons out there in the bottle, and the bottle being a collectible item itself. So the model that you followed is a very brand-led model. And one of the things that also stood out for me was the conflict between, as you said, the artist versus the businessman.
Correct.
And reminds me of the book War of Art that I've read recently.
Yes.
And yeah. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective, Saurabh.
Welcome.
Okay, so moving on forward, guys, what we have here right now is a kind of a rapid fire round. And this round is designed to ask some frequently asked questions about funding. And the objective of this rapid fire round is to get a very quick perspective from our panelists, either in one word or a sentence. And for our audience, if you have any questions, just feel free to put them on the chat box, and we'll try to come back to you as soon as possible. And the first question, and I'll be going kind of a round robin way with every panelist. And the first question is to Mr. Rajat Jain, which is funding during idea phase or versus funding during the validation of a proof of concept. If you could just give us a very quick perspective on this particular, it's not a question, but maybe a statement, but your quick perspective on funding during idea phase versus funding during validation of proof of concept.
I couldn't hear you, Aditya. Funding during idea phase versus funding during?
Validation of a proof of concept.
So I think funding during idea is far more difficult. It is better to get the idea validated through a process and then go for funding.
Right. Thank you so much.
Investors will ask for that proof of validation. They need evidence for funding.
Great. Neeraj, what would be your opinion on the topic?
Neeraj, you're mute.
Yeah. So pretty much bang on. I would wait for POC or proof of concept before funding. Idea stage funding is extremely difficult. So I would actually wait for the proof of concept. Absolutely.
Right. Thank you, Neeraj. Samir, what would be your opinion on the topic?
I think out of personal experience, I think idea phase is always difficult. Both from your time perspective, if you are a founder, you'd spend disproportionate amount of time trying to raise fund during the idea phase. So my advice is definitely go post validation of the business idea.
Perfect. So everybody's in agreement, and bringing Sohrab quickly into the foray. Sohrab, what's your opinion on the topic?
No, pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Which person would want to put you if you just come up with an idea? Certainly doesn't make sense. Yes, in very rare circumstances, if the promoter has really proven himself and given 2-3 deadly projects before, then yes. But then he would have made enough money to put in money on his own. So I would still
Yeah, pretty much. So I mean, I've met a lot of entrepreneurs, and the thing about entrepreneurs is they are almost delusionally optimistic, and that's what I believe the game is about, entrepreneurship. And many entrepreneurs, they have that perspective that I have a great idea, and if I could only raise capital to make it come to life. So relevant question, but the panel is completely in agreement towards get your validation.
Aditya, just to add to that, I think the context of skin in the game comes in again. Idea to roz hazaron aate hain hame yaar.
Yeah.
What is it that you put into it? I think that's the question investor will ask again.
Correct. Absolutely. Okay, the second question, and Rajat, since you're here, started making revenue, but not yet profitable. Is it a good time to look for funding or go the organic route?
I think absolutely. Question is, what is the business model you're looking at? Are you a B2B business? Are you a B2C business? And like I said, the funding is required for, 2 or 3 things. Either you are surviving after an idea and validated, or you want to scale. Right. Profitability, as you can see around the world, companies that have been unprofitable for 15 years have raised billions of dollars. So I don't think it's that connected to profit. It is definitely connected to skin in the game. What have you put in? What is the viability? And so on. And mostly investors invest to get return over the future. And these are long-term investors. So in 5-7 साल में अगर आप उनको 25% IRR दिखा रहे हो, it doesn't matter whether you're profitable today or not, my view.
Right. Thank you so much. And quickly want to get Neeraj on the same perspective. So Neeraj, what do you think? Started making revenue, but not yet profitable. Is it a good time to look for funding or go the organic?
I would say even earlier, because if you're short of funds, you have a proof of concept. Yeah, ideas validated. You don't have revenues, you can still raise funds.
Oh, okay.
Post revenue, definitely you can raise funds. Now, if you're profitable, you don't need funds probably. You can do internal generation of money. You'll need funds if you're profitable to go to the global market. Then you need a profitable, actually even then you may not, but it's good to have some kind of, positive cash or a PAT to go global. But otherwise, I think it's great to just go and with the idea validated, go to the market and raise some funds.
Awesome. Samir, your perspective on the same?
Pretty much what you talked about. I think fundamentally, as far as revenue and profitability is concerned, I think very few startups are able to hit a certain volume and a profitability in a brief period of time. So I think raising funds during that phase when your revenue is increasing but you're not profitable is not a bad idea. I think what the investor typically looks like is essentially the growth part in the right direction. Is your per unit economics making sense? Have you got a client base on which you can further build up a business model tomorrow? I mean, that's important. You see, at the same time, if you were to create a model where there's no vision or hope of profitability for the investor, then you're not going to raise your funds, right? So you've got to obviously have a convincing proposition that what you're building up in terms of client base and the per unit economics is going to make sense in the long term. On the point regarding will you raise funds when you're profitable, it's an interesting point because I still feel that even though you're profitable, you could still want to raise a much larger series because you want to bet on an idea in a very large way. So for example, you're working on a particular model and you believe that you're generating X amount of money, but you need 5X amount of money to really scale the business up. That's also not a bad idea to raise funds. That your internal so-called capital which you're generating may not be good enough and strong enough for you to get to the next level. So I think whether you're making losses or profit, I think you could raise at both levels. I guess the key thing is your business model viable and is your per unit economic story making sense?
Perfect. Thank you so much for your input.
Yeah, one additional point I want to make is that with every fundraise, equity fundraise, you dilute.
Yeah.
So how much of the company you want to give up? it also is important consideration at how much you want to raise and at what point you want to raise.
Very, 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 very relevant perspective, Neeraj. That you are diluting your company as you're raising funds, and what's that balance that as a entrepreneur that you want to come towards. Saurabh, what's your perspective on a business has started making revenue, we are not yet profitable? Is it a good time to look for funding, or go down the organic route?
It depends. If you can't survive with the kind of money and you're in a loss-making situation, then you've got no choice but to raise money. Number one, right? And but you'll have a hard time trying to negotiate with someone and convincing somebody to put money into the company if you're a loss-making company. I firmly believe if I were to invest money, supposing in any company, I would certainly look at profitability and not. And if it's a loss-making company, I personally won't invest any money. Okay, but of course, institutions have a different viewpoint. I also believe that it's very important to raise money, even if you're profitable. And profitability, I don't mean at the corporate level, but at least at the base, unit economics should definitely be positive. We are not talking about corporate and your G&A cost, or general and administration. Unit economics, profitability should certainly be there. Otherwise, how in the world will the business ever become profitable? You can make these Excel sheets and show great marketing, but it's not for me. It's very simple. Those Excel sheets, the proof lies in what you do, not really in Excel sheets. You can make a great business plan, but ideation stage business plan, as for me, has no meaning. And you can easily go to anybody and then he can make some fantastic business plan. It doesn't make sense. Today, as for me, it's very important to raise money because it's not like the olden days. If you remember, the 1980s, 1950s, 1960s, companies would run for 90 years, 80 years. Today, the mortality rate has really come down. I mean, has gone. For example, companies are surviving for 20 years, 25 years. And if you actually look at the stock market, companies which are doing very well are no longer there. So I feel that very soon, you'll have to make your money and profitability in the next maybe decade, 10, 12 years. And that's the life that you will have. And for that, you need a catalyst. So as for me, in today's time, raising money is a short thing. It's not like the olden times. You have to do it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your perspective. And one of the things I specifically noted is the difference in approach, Saurabh, that you would have. Like, you're not looking for a possible profit in the future, but you would rather, as an investor, if you are to invest, you would look for a company that's profitable today. And a very quick rejoinder, bringing in back Neeraj and Rajat into this. Neeraj and Rajat, like what I heard from you guys was the viability is something that you were looking for. And the profitability, even though there's uncertainty, can come in the future. And as investors, you would be inclined to invest in companies where there is a kind of future potential. So a very quick rejoinder on what Saurabh said is that as an investor, he would probably look for profitability right now. And as investors, probably you would look at a much bigger picture. And just wanted your perspective on what Saurabh said.
So let me go first. So, in my view, profitability is, over the plan period. Now, whether it's an Excel-based plan, it has to be based on assumptions which are verifiable, which make sense to us as investors. Let's say there's a great idea. Yeah, there are customers who are talking, who the founder's talking to already. There are some contracts available that this is, already implementable, or it's been implemented at some places. Trial runs have happened, which means the proof of concept is there. Now, the startups don't have the ability to convert the idea into a business. That's where the people like us come in. But can you help convert the idea into a business, into a commercial venture? And that's where the mentoring comes in. The startups need to have advisors and mentors. They need to have investors, both. So advisors and mentors help them to take this idea to people, to corporates, to customers. And if the view, I think this was mentioned earlier by Samir and also by Saurabh, I think, scalability. Is the idea scalable? For me, if the idea is scalable, there is a unit profitability available, or at the unit level profit is being made or can be made. Maybe the company is at a loss level, it's okay. and profit can come in the future, if I see the cash flow and profit both in the next 5 years, I'll make a five-year plan. For me, 5-year plan is an important plan. And in 5 years' time, how does the cash flow look like? Will the business be cash positive in the 5 years' time? Assuming that all the assumptions which we are putting on the table are reasonable. No, they're not pie in the sky kind of assumption. And that's where the judgment comes in. You have to have the judgment that, this will work or this will not work. And that's how, there are so many brilliant ideas coming in from people, and they don't have the wherewithal to convert it into a business venture and not work on the profitability of it. And that's where you and I come in to help them make it profitable, provided we can visualize it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for your perspective, Neeraj. Rajat, what would be your perspective on this?
So I think Neeraj, Neeraj has covered most of it. All I can say is you're giving me a perfect plug here. I do this for a living. I mentor early stage startups. We've mentored over 100 companies. None of them have been, obviously profitability is way into the future. We are people who take early punts on entrepreneurs and mentor them to build a business, and people like Neeraj and hundreds of others support those businesses with angel capital. And I agree, the mortality rate in this part of the life cycle of the company is perhaps 90% or 80 or more in India. In the West, it's about 70%. But if you can improve that dramatically by choosing the right entrepreneur, the right idea, the right mentor programs, you improve the probability of success. And the last point, I think this point was made about dilution. If you invest early, you get valuations which are perhaps sensible compared to if you invest late, you may not have that money to invest anyway, right? Yeah. So I think that's another point to remember. What is the value that you enter this building at? Are you going in at the foundation level? Are you going it on the first floor? Or are you already on the 10th story when Series E is happening? So, it's a matter of risk versus reward, honestly, Aditya. Yeah. And it's a matter of how you create a sensible business out of it. And venture capitalists have a different model. Angel investors have a different model. Banks have a different model. And private equity investors have a totally different model.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Aditya, one point I want to add. The other important thing to look at from an investor point of view, from an angel point of view, like me, is that will I get an exit for this or not? Will my investment be stuck forever?
Right.
As a minority, shareholder, 1% equity I'm going to hold in the company. If I can't see an exit over next, reasonable time, 5, 7, 10 years, is a problem. So am I investing in an idea which is scalable and will find an IPO ultimately, or be an acquisition target? So that's another important consideration from my point.
Right, absolutely. I mean, everybody invests to get some kind of an ROI at the end of the day. So the exit is definitely into the perspective for an investor. And I think that really hits the nail, like, are you going to get your money back plus more in the next 5, 7, 10 years, if that's in the horizon?
I have to, Aditya, come in here.
Sure.
I was on another panel with Invest India and Startup India last week. And very similar conversation around investments and returns. And I have to say that a very strong view emerged that businesses that don't give exits to investors, but become lifestyle businesses, are also smart entrepreneurs who can give you lifelong dividends and returns, but never give you an exit. So there was a hot debate. And I think one of the outcomes was that those entrepreneurs who create smart, long-term, profitable lifestyle businesses are also very smart entrepreneurs.
Awesome. I think that's a very, very interesting perspective, like smart entrepreneurs who are actually building a business as a kind of a lifestyle kind of a business, as you rightly mentioned. Quickly bringing another question into the foray. And Sameer, why don't you share your perspective on this? The question is, like, a lot of people feel that, if I'm looking for external funding, I'm letting go of my company. And I think the topic of a matchmaking between an investor and an entrepreneur also comes into the question. And just wanted your quick view on the topic.
I think on this entire concept of dilution, etc., that's, my perspective is slightly different. I always say that, do you want to construct a $5 million company and be a 100% shareholder of a $5 million company, or would you rather see a company being a $300 million company and you maybe have 20%? I think the concept of dilution has to be seen in the context of the size of the pie. And if your funding is able to increase the size of the pie, where mathematically the percentages don't matter. The absolute value which you're creating for yourself tends to increase. Then you've got to take that point. And the same logic is what I kind of tend to apply to people who are running companies, that even when it comes to diluting shares for giving shares to other key members in your organization, be as generous as possible. This concept that I want to hold most of my shares, I want to capture most of the value, is actually locking your value in the system. By not having enough people in your system who share the same vision, who've got enough skin in the game, who see their value increasing over a period of time, you'll never be able to unlock the true potential of your company. So I think this entire concept of dilution, to me, and the timing, etc., is really a function of how much do you see that funding is going to give a boost up to the overall size of the venture. So if by, let's say, taking in $1 million or $2 million, you can increase your value by 2-3 times, then I think the percentages don't matter. Obviously, a lot of times, you got to be careful that you're not taking money without having a well thought through plan. So that's where you could get it wrong. I mean, I've seen some of my friends who've kind of run into this kind of problem where you've gotten on the wrong side of the cycle in terms of investments. Your business models aren't scaled. You've gone in for desperate funding, and that's when you dilute, and that's when you are left with nothing at the end of the day. But it's a question, a context of where you are, which side of the cycle. I look at more from a perspective of what that investment will do in terms of the size of the pie. To me, that's a more important decision-making context rather than the percentage.
Great. Just very quick view on letting go of the vision of the company, and this kind of a thing that sometimes entrepreneurs have. If I get an investor on board, maybe they start controlling my vision, the mission of a company, and that kind of goes for a toss. So what's your view on that?
It's a very important point, because I've been through two cycles myself, where the first venture, I unfortunately had experience of getting into somebody who was pretty much wanted to micromanage things, wanted to get into every aspect of the business. I think the concept of a founder and entrepreneurship is that you need space. Entrepreneurs by nature tend to be visionaries, dreamers, and if you tend to constrict them in terms of a framework, etc., then you're kind of sub-optimizing their capabilities. So clearly, I think even getting the right investor with the right sort of context, perspective, is very important.
Right.
And at times, you could get lucky. At times, you could get unlucky. I mean, it's easy to talk about the fact that you should select people, but at times it's the luck of the draw. If you get stuck with somebody who's a micromanager who wants to get into every aspect of your business, who doesn't trust you, it can be a bad one. But it's a very important piece. I always keep on saying that the board and the investors can play a huge role in scaling up a company, as well as they can play a huge role in letting a company go in the southward direction if they don't play the game right.
Right. I want to bring in Rajat on this perspective. Rajat, I believe that investors are also entrepreneurs, right? And so what do you feel about the matchmaking, and what do you look, or what happens when you are investing in a business, and how do you go about making a match?
It's as risky as getting married. You start somewhere, there is a courtship period, there is an engagement, there is a term sheet, there is an SHA, there is a signature, and then you're married. And then you realize that he's sitting on your board and it's not going the way you want it to. And then it becomes a story of compromise. So I think it's fundamentally, we should look at it as a partnership where both of us, the investor and the entrepreneur, have the same goal, which is to make it, as Samir said, a $300 million company. We may have, the destination is the same, our paths may be different, and you've got to choose the most efficient path together. So you may have conversations, you may agree to disagree, you may agree to agree. But I mean, if you disagree to disagree, then there is a problem. And there are situations where litigations happen and so on, and we are aware of a lot of them. But I think smart entrepreneurs and smart investors will avoid that route because it doesn't take them to the 300 million point, which is the common goal. So I think it is about being smart. It's about being sensible, not only while choosing the investor or entrepreneur, but also in the entire journey till value creation, whether it's exit or otherwise.
Right. Thank you so much for your perspective, Rajat. Sohrab would want to bring you in. What's your opinion on this?
Look, like Rajat said, it's a marriage, right? I would say I absolutely agree with him, except that where marriages are concerned, divorces are far easier. In this case, If there's a divorce,
Saurabh, I didn't want to go there. My wife
Rajat, in this case, you don't lose 50%, but you lose about 100% here.
Well, very good point, Saurabh. I totally agree.
Okay. So most of the cases, yeah, the investor is a pretty smart man, okay, or investors, the term sheets are strictly in favor of the person of the investor. Okay, what happened is, because in this entrepreneur, because he's in his act of desperation, sometimes he just succumbs to that term sheet, and that can be very dangerous. I've seen a lot of people actually suffer, and believe you me, it's a very tough situation. And this is where I stress on profitability, and where your point of interference is there. As long as your company is profitable, nobody is going to interfere in your business. The fact is, because it is running as per the business plan, it is profitable. I've not seen people interfering. Now, the minute
things go wrong
from the business plan, that means somebody will interfere, right? Whoever's put in his hard-earned money, or whoever's responsible for the money that he's accumulated from people, he'll also have ants in his pants at the end of the day. So the simple fact is, when you project a business plan, make sure it's down to earth. Okay. And also you should, I think, for any young entrepreneur, you should definitely know the art of negotiation, and you should definitely be able to hold yourself. Otherwise, with a smart investor, you tend to get carried away, and money is something that it could be used to bully you. So it's very important to have this, and you've got to let an investor know that every time the answer, oh, this is company policy, doesn't work against you, right? There needs to be something more. So you need to be smart, and you need to be a smart negotiator. I would say that. But yes, investor is a boon to have. In fact, I would say, because they lend credibility, they lend
mentorship.
Mentorship, credibility. They attract maybe a private equity coming in next. They attract the bigger, larger financial institutions or a buyout. And also, you must understand that sometimes, if your vision is 10 years, the angel investor or companies that come in early stage, their vision is possibly 4 or 5 years. They want to see an exit plan. So you've got to be very careful and see whether that kind of matches or not.
Right.
And then quest for that 4 or 5 years, it could lead to a different vision altogether. So these are some of the things. But just be a very smart negotiator. Anybody who's a budding entrepreneur.
Right. Well, Neeraj, just want to bring you on the same question with an added perspective. Like, how do you establish a fit in terms of if you're investing in some person, right, or a business? Where is that line of a fit in terms of their vision? Of the person, the personality, the company? How do you also establish a fit in terms of matchmaking?
So there is no hard and fast rule here. Sometimes some investors are comfortable with, let's say, a particular kind of companies, let's say edtech, fintech, medtech. They're more comfortable, they understand that subject better, so they'll only invest in that area. There are others who are very open to ideas across board. There are groups of investors who have experts from every field. Let's say healthcare, tech, or B2C, or supply chain logistics. They may be more open as a group to invest in all kind of companies. And if I'm a lone individual and my expertise is let's say FMCG and healthcare, I may be wary to invest in other fields because I don't understand that as much. So that's the first part. But having said that, having invested, I agree with other panelists who talked about, it's a marriage, it's happened. And then I think we're working for the same cause.
Right.
Trust has to be built over a period of time. You can't be interfering in the running of the. It's very important to keep the strategic away from operational. You can't get operational. The strategic inputs are most welcome by the founders, by the entrepreneurs. They want doors to be opened in the companies. They want doors to be opened in the corporates, which the investors can bring in that value. But if the investors say, oh, you know what? Show me every payment you make. I'm going to approve everything you do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. That's operational. Yeah. Be very careful that investors don't step into that. It's okay to have a review meeting every once in a while, like once in 2 months, once in 3 months. If the going is good, even once in a quarter is great. If the going is not so good, once in a month is required. and the investors are very, very worried about cash position. So if the entrepreneurs can give them the comfort of, cash position, improved cost economics, profitability, and, scaling, growth, they'll be very happy. They will not interfere in the day-to-day matters. And they'll be very happy partners in that case.
Right.
That's my view.
Oh, very, very, very brilliant perspective. Like there are strategic conversations, and then there is something that's more of an operational side. And when the micromanagement kind of starts happening, I think that's where the problem starts coming in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much for your input. Okay, moving on forward. What are the top 3, 4, 5 things that an investor is looking for? I think we've touched upon the subject, but just so that we kind of consolidate those bullet points, so to speak. 3 things, 5 things that you, as investors, you are looking in entrepreneurs or the business.
So I'll go first.
Sure.
Idea in the product, team, scalability, and exit.
Okay. Idea, product, team, scalability, and exit.
Yeah.
Great.
Let me add to that a couple of other thoughts.
Sure.
I think one is the risk involved, particularly risk in execution. Like it's great to have an Excel sheet and an idea and a team, but has this team done something before? Can they execute? And the second thing could be, what sort of returns do I expect against this risk? Is it 15%? Is it 25%? Or is it 100%? And I may be willing to have different levels of risk appetite for different levels of return.
Right.
So I think these 2 things get added to obviously viability and idea and team and all of that when we look.
Brilliant. Samir, what 3 things or 5 things are you looking from an investor? Let's flip the question.
Well, the few things I look for an investor, I think the point which you raised about, is ability of an investor to, or at least when we're having this conversation, to build up that trust that that there is a strategic element where we expect the investor to get involved. The operational side is really our business. The other thing which we expect investors to do is, from a founder perspective, is to ensure that the investor is aware of the fact that any startup by in nature, it is going to go through ups and downs, right? There is going to be fire at every point of time. I mean, every day you wake up in the morning, there is some fire, right? And how open and how so-called understanding is an investor on the concept that, listen, there is going to be trouble, there are going to be failures, and we can have an honest conversation with an investor about some of these pieces. That would be the second thing. I think the mid to long-term orientation, I agree with Neeraj that one of the key things the investor looks at is exit. But I think how long is that exit? I mean, I think between 5 to 7 years is typically a reasonable phase when an investor looks at moving on. So obviously having that orientation, a mid to long-term orientation, because it does take this kind of time for a company to stand up. I would think these are the 2-3 things I would expect an investor. Strategic ability to kind of open doors in the future, play a role in moving the company to the next level at some point of time, whether it's the Series B, Series C at some point of time, playing a role there. Being a good conversationalist, somebody who can be honest and, you can share good news as well as bad news. Somebody who's communicative and somebody who you can build up a good trust level with.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you for your perspective, Samir. And one thing that really stood out, like you wake up in the morning as an entrepreneur and you get to know that there is some kind of fire, and you would probably need an investor who would kind of walk with you hand in hand and help you navigate through those challenges. Saurabh, quickly bringing you into perspective, and what are the 3 things, 4 things, 5 things that you're looking from an investor? You're muted right now, Saurabh.
Mine are a little different because based on my experiences, but I agree with everybody, whatever everyone said. But I would say, every individual has an ability to execute an idea, and a lot of them are successful. So I would say to the investors, especially today, India is full of such talented people. Don't just look at pedigree, number one. Okay, that's something that everybody tends to look at. Oh my God, IITian, but that's not everybody is from there. Not everybody is from IIM. What about the others? Why can't they get the same? It's not their fault. It's very difficult to get through IIT. That's fine. It's understandable that people may be a little better, but sometimes a person who can execute the idea is far, far better. So I've seen many a times that pedigree becomes a rather important subject here. And the fact is that the entrepreneur can easily get somebody from IIT-IIM. So it's not so you can get a CEO to run the organization. So number one, I would say, I won't be very comfortable if somebody just came in and had that mindset. Second, I think that they always, I think his thoughts are most welcome, because the very reason that he's coming is to build credibility of the company, not to interfere too much, like we said, not to not to get into nitty-gritties of operation. I think an entrepreneur is always encouraged, if there is, when funding happens, there's a certain amount of secondary and primary both. Everybody today, and it's, oh my God, primary, they catch hold of that poor investor, that poor entrepreneur, that he doesn't get enough breathing ground in terms of, like, why can't he get some secondary funding? Why is it that only primary funding is to be infused into the business? Can you imagine if there's secondary funding and the entrepreneur sees the kind of money he can make and experiences, not just in dreams, right? But he can make it, he'd be far, far, far more motivated. As for me, this is my experience. I would certainly look at that if I was good. And third, when it comes to negotiation sheets, be reasonable here. I mean, don't just follow company policy, right? One has to have logic here everywhere.
Right.
That's all I would say.
Awesome. Thank you for your perspective, Saurabh. Okay, coming to the question at hand, I think that's what we've all gathered here for, which is, the perspective of funding yourself, of self-funding versus external funding, and just your views on the topic. Let's start with Neeraj on this.
Sorry, I missed you. Can you repeat once again?
Yeah. So the topic of the conversation today is essentially, external funding versus self-funding. And I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs are right now looking and hearing the conversation. Just your quick perspective on the same, Neeraj.
No, I think it's a great burning topic, self-funding versus external funding. And a lot of people actually start thinking that, yeah, great, I'm going to do a business and I'm going to fund, borrow everything from outside. Or I'll put in very little money and I'll take everything from outside. It doesn't work.
Yep.
As pointed out at the very, very beginning by Rajat, that, what's your skin in the game? I mean, that's so critical.
Yep.
But great topic. And today's time, when the funding is drying in the market, it's almost dried up in the market, right? And yet a lot of good startups are getting funding. So, it's very interesting dichotomy that on one hand, there's no fund in the market. We're saying that, oh, paisa nahi hai market mein. And on the other side, all good startups are getting funded. So there is money, but they're looking at right business, right opportunity, and right idea, right scalability. So you got to really choose and see that self-funding and external funding at what point of time. They go hand in hand. They can't go separately.
Right.
Before external funding. I would only say that.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much for your perspective, Neeraj. Samir, want to bring you on this particular question again?
I think this got discussed at length already. Self-funding is possibly one of the highest probability option you should go for when you're starting a firm. And obviously, as your company matures, that's when you look at external funding, because the quantum of funding required is going to be higher. You may not have that kind of money. But self-funding, when you're starting off an idea, I think that's possibly one of the only options you've got, or maybe one of the most higher probable options. It also builds up confidence in the investor that you believe in your idea and you're willing to bet your ship on it. That's the key thing. It's very interesting that when I begin my entrepreneurship journey, I met up with a VC, and he made a very interesting observation. He said, Samir, if you want to raise 1 crore from the market at the start of your business, it's like 1,000,000 times more difficult than raising $5 million, because the stage at which you're raising a $5 million is going to be when your company is established. And raising $5 million is going to be far simpler than raising 1 crore rupees at the ideation phase. So I think clearly self-funding is possibly the only way to go. And obviously raising external funds becomes more relevant as the company scales up.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Samir. Saurabh, your view on the topic.
Look, everybody wants skin in the game. Entrepreneur ne kitna paisa lagaya, right? Tabhi hum paise lagayenge. Fact is, an entrepreneur can also turn around and say, "Yaar, how much money is the angel investor putting? Or how much money has unka skin in the game kitna hai?" Right? If I was and why? So it's a constant tussle. Okay, if if I was there, I would want that the more skin in the game the investor puts in, right? And the investor will want that I would put in more skin of the game, right? So the idea is what is the business? What is your belief in the business? How good are you at negotiation? What are you able to convince? If I'm concerned, I would love it if my skin in the game is hardly anything and the investor puts all the skin in the game. And that's the game that I will play. Why will I play a game where I will put more money and take a risk? It doesn't make sense. You have to understand that's the basic human psyche. And so the thing is that I would say if you're able to raise money from outside and with their minimum investment that you do, I think you're a winner. And that is why I stress on a lot of things. If you put your own skin in the game, बहुत ज़्यादा फिर तो कोई भी पैसे डालेगा, right? What is the if the money is not that that if you know that you're doing a great business plan, it's not a big deal. So this is something that every entrepreneur should learn. Look, I've learned from experiences, growing up.
Right.
So I could tell you all this. These are very practical issues, and a young entrepreneur should always think about all this. Negotiate, and learn negotiation. Yeah. And stand up for your. Be smart. Don't be.
Chris Voss from the book Never Split a Difference says that every conversation, everything in life is a negotiation. Every conversation is a negotiation. And what I've kind of gathered from you is, like an entrepreneur is, can be a hustler. He can be a street smart entrepreneur, and if he can probably make his way without putting his skin in the game and create a business, why not? That's a very important question. Rajat, your views on what Sohrab said, and also on the broader topic of external versus self-funding.
I think the first question to ask is the entrepreneur should ask, depending on who or where, in what stage it is, do you really have a choice? I think in 80% of the cases, there is no choice of external funding. There is nobody who's going to fund you.
Probably even more. Yeah.
Probably even more. So I think if there is no choice, as it was famously said, if you have no choice, you have no problem. Right? So you just go for internal funding, and the internal funding is about bootstrapping, is about getting it to a point of viability, or somebody said proof of concept, somebody said profitability. Different kinds of investors will have different thresholds to invest. So first question is, entrepreneurs go out and start looking for fund. Are you really fundable? Are you investable? Do you have an investable business? Is any kind of investor, bank or otherwise, bank to pehle hi bolta hai ki debt equity ratio chahiye, so already he is starting with some equity infusion, or he says I want collateral, so he wants to take away your house and your car and whatever you might have, right? So I think first question to answer is, do you really have a choice? And second is, when you have to take the decision of internal funding versus external funding, when you have a choice, then you start looking at, what is the tenure, what is the cost of funds. Neeraj has been answering questions on the chat. I am seeing equity capital is more expensive than debt capital. There are tax breaks. Then we start getting into a lot of technicalities of what is the cost of capital, what is the risk profile of your company. Are you willing to give up some shareholding and get a new partner and get married and take it in the positive light or the negative light? I think we've debated a lot of these subjects. But fundamentally, we have 100 entrepreneurs who see us. 80-90% of them don't actually have a choice. And I think that's the key question.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. At this point, I think, Kanchan, do you have something to say?
Yes, I have a very pertinent question that's coming to my mind again and again after listening to everyone. And I love Sohrab's view when he says that if the entrepreneur had the money, why would he go to an investor? And he would love to have an investor who puts in more money, because obviously the entrepreneur is the one who started out with the idea, and he anyway has a skin in the game. And that is why now that he wants to scale, he doesn't have the money, is the reason that he's willing to divest. He's willing to look at somebody investing in his company and take him to the next level. Now my question, and I do understand from the investor's point of view that, all the questions of viability, risk, proof of concept, all of those things, obviously they matter, because those are the parameters, those are the areas that will give you an idea of how much or whether you should invest or not. But I have a very simple, plain question, and I don't know if you can answer this. But being investors, I'd like to ask you, what is the bare minimum ROI that an investor looks at when you're looking at investment? And is there a percentage of acceptable risk that you think that, okay, this kind of a risk I am willing to accept and go into it, and this is the kind of return on investment I'm looking at? Because we've heard of things like timeline of 4 to 7 years, 10 years, 15 years. But what is the percentage of ROI that's going on in the mind of the investor when we are talking of these things? And anybody, Rajat, Neeraj, anybody?
Let me try and give you, a structured answer to start with, right? So the structured answer is that this investing in unlisted early stage companies is classically angel investing. It is higher risk and therefore higher return. Typical returns people expect in venture and private equity are in the order of 20-25%. So angel investors expect anything above 25, 30, 35% of return. That's the structured answer. Now, can they get it? Can you measure risk? Is there a risk chart? I think it's mostly in the minds of investors. Angel investors are also very flexible people. I think we've discussed the Indian scenario predominantly here, but in the Silicon Valley, ideas get funded every day. You go and have breakfast with an angel investor and you could come back with a $50,000 check because the angel likes your idea. And that's where the word angel is actually coming from. Okay, we are not that mature a society where people have reached that stage or made that kind of money, because in many ways angel investing is also giving back into the entrepreneurship world. So a lot of entrepreneurs who've had great exits in the world put aside $10 million for angel investing. And we say classically in angel investing, the day you write the check, you should forget about it. Nothing's going to come out of it. We haven't reached there. So I think the Indian government and the Indian sort of system has multiple grants, multiple opportunities where you can get, at least in the tech world. I work with Department of Science and Technology, Department of Biotechnology, Ministry of Electronics and IT. Every government department has innovation funds today. You can go out and get innovation capital. They give money to incubators. We work with a lot of them. 50 lakh grant from BIRAC on a biotechnology idea is one of the simplest thing you can get by putting an application in. Problem is most people don't know about these things, right? And we worry about going to the government and asking for money. Pata nahi kya hoga, ghar baar le jayenge, jail mein chale jayenge and all that. It's not true. We work with an incubator in Bhubaneswar. 140 companies are sitting there. 90 of them have these grants. So koi angel investor hai nahi. The initial part of what is being said here, POC, whatever early stage conversion can happen through typically non-investor money as well, is what I'm trying to put on the table.
Right.
Great. Thank you so much. That clarifies. Yes, Neeraj, your view on that.
Yeah, what Rajat said, so why in India you don't get money at the breakfast table? Because we've not seen too many exits for angel investors. And once you see the success, I think the community will mature. The investor community will mature to a level that they'll start risking their money on an idea itself. We've not yet matured to that level. 1. 2, I think trust has to be there, and there are people out to, also loot you in a way. And I loosely, because, so I'll give you an example, and I've seen it personally happening. There are people walking in with an idea. So fantastic. And who are you? Team. Oh, I have had 3 exits. I made $4 million, $10 million. And this is a new idea I've got. How much money you need? 80 lakhs, 1 crore. I said, really? I said, couldn't you put your money yourself? I mean, you made $10 million, you're saying, and you can't put 1 crore? And the answer is not there. So, I think that the trust deficit still is there. And once you know that what is being talked is really true, and the negotiation then, was being talked about earlier, if it's a win-win for both have to make money with the same objective in mind. Once we mature to that level, I think we'll start seeing much earlier handshakes, which you don't see today. But I think right now, it's still, we are still a few years away from there.
So what you mean to also say is that the entrepreneurs in our country still haven't reached a stage where they realize that it's not necessary only for an investor, or it's not important only for an investor to invest in for you to grow. You also have to not put in your skin in the game, not just by getting your idea or by all of these things. You have to put a lot of risk at stage for your own self and then expect the investor to have faith in you. So not just ride on the investor's money.
Yeah, also, Kanchan, I've seen I've seen the entrepreneurs who want money so that they can start getting salary. Now, but I've also seen people with saying, okay, next 2 years, I will not draw a penny. Now, that's a very good way of putting a plan ahead, that I will not draw any money from the venture for next 2 years or 3 years. But that's also skin in the game. Another way of putting money in, that you don't draw money out.
True.
Right.
Great. Thank you so much.
At this point, I think I'll just open the panel discussion and for Q&As. I already see a raised up hand by Mr. Sanjeev Jawahar.
Okay,
Sanjeev?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I ask first?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Aditya. My question is to Saurabh. He's going about it the franchising model. Now, obviously, the market is restricted with the franchise model. The franchisee has to have the means and the moolah to be able to accept the franchise terms. It restricts the market, and the growth will be slow only in the name of skin in the game. What if the franchisee arranges funds from bank finance in a way so that he tries to understand the profit model? So I'd like to understand what is the profitability model in franchisee to be a sustaining venture in the long term, since you've done 300 plus franchisees within the country on Kevinters. And just a small point, even in the 1970s, I've drunk Kevinters strawberry milkshakes at Connaught Place. So from 1940s to 2000s, there seems to be a gap of 60 years, my friend. 30 years down the line, Kevinters was available in Connaught Place, A block. And I partook repeated doses of the milkshake. So either it was not genuine Kevinters or Kevinters was selling. So Saurabh, somewhere the facts needed correction, but that's in the lighter vein. And another question thrown to Neeraj and to, who's the other gentleman? Sorry, Neeraj Jain as well as Rajat. My point is, your angel investors are always looking for exit route, which either comes through an IPO or it comes through sale of the company itself or a stake sale. IPO is easier said than done. Just how many % of companies ever convert to an IPO from the investor startup stage? Selling your stake or selling the company itself is again easier said than done. Exit routes are never going to be easy, especially in the Indian context. Now you mentioned that bank finance is taboo because no company has ever grown with bank finance in the long run. My take is bank is not after you're selling the company, converting it into an IPO, or forcing a stake sale. They are at a certain fixed percentage of interest. Of course, assuming you reach that stage.
Sanjeev, sir, I'm so sorry to interrupt and come in between. If you could just be a little brief.
Point question. Pointed question is only one. If bank finance is used primarily as a source of funding, where the fear of an IPO or a fear of pressure from the investor is not there, and they're also not looking at your profit margin of 25% or whatever. You have 8, 10, 12%, whatever bank financing. So why is it necessarily bad? That was one point. Point number 2 was to Saurabh about franchisee model. How is the percentage worked out for a franchisee? What kind of return does he expect when he has to cough in the moolah by himself, sizable moolah?
Saurabh, why don't you go first on the question that Sanjeev asked?
Yeah. Okay, great question there. But let me tell you something about Kevinters. See, Kevinters actually shut shop in the 1960s. So I'll answer this very quickly. But what happened is, when it shut shop, there were many distributors that existed, okay, with different names. But once Kevinters shut shop and Dalmia family wasn't really interested in, reinstating, a lot of them used the name Kevinters. And at that point, nobody really, so you'll have one off in, but they won't own the registration rights and all. So in particular, if you see, Kevinters is very different. This is much more modern, cooler, trendier, a Kevinters where you can take a bottle and be proud of the picture that you want to take in front of it. So that's to answer your first question. Second, franchisee, like I said, the franchisee should always make money. And it's paramount. It's the most essential thing, that the franchisee should make money. We are looking at people who are working in corporate jobs, people who are, who are not necessarily the position of a CEO, who own who earn insane amount of salaries compared to the others, which of course is a separate topic, but yeah, we'll discuss that. But the thing is that, so they should have the ability to invest that money and earn money. Okay, so there is a risk factor. Okay, there is a chance that, but our franchisees, which are typically doing the ROI, they are able to earn money. In fact, within EBITDA break even, I would say it's about 4 months, 5 months, nothing beyond that. And in certain cases where the sale is not happening, it takes about 2 years. Yes, there could be a couple of chances where that figure is never achieved. But I would say, if you were to put an average, I would say everybody recovers their money in about 1.5 years, and which I think is commendable and phenomenal, because we, unlike other investors, we, like I also mentioned earlier, profitability is the key. Where I'm concerned, I don't look at, frugal spending and stuff and marketing itna, and we are concerned about profitability. So as long as profitability is great, the franchisee is happy, and franchisee frankly is looking at profitability. So you've got to keep your fixed expenses low. We've been able to do it, be very particular about every penny, every penny matters. That's the attitude I have. Now, a lot of people would say, oh my God, lala aa gaya or something, but that's absolutely ridiculous. I feel that, a particular style of running the company where you take care about your finances and take care about the revenues, it'll ensure that you have a profitable company. Imagine people have faith in you, they're putting money in you, and it's not your mother who's putting money in you, it's not your father, it's not an angel investor, it's somebody who you don't know, but that person is putting money into your company. So I think it's an art, and it's phenomenal that people trust you and put money into you.
Rajat, the second question that Sanjeev sir asked was, why is bank finance a taboo, or is it bad? A very quick answer, because we are running short on time and there are two more people on the queue to ask questions.
I think, bank finance has its role clearly, but I think at a certain point in time, banks have metrics on which they finance companies, and I don't think any startup will clear those metrics. So I think the point I made earlier was, where is the choice? Startups have equity that they can give to somebody. They don't even have cash. They don't have assets. They don't have collateral.
Right.
So which bank will give you bank finance? Unless it is SIDBI, which is going to give you a grant.
I'd like to bring in Ankit Kanodia. Ankit, I see that you raised your hand earlier on. Ankit, are you there?
Yeah.
Please ask a very pointed question, and also do mention the panelists that you are asking the question.
Sure. So, Mike, I have a very simple question, and it is directed to all the speakers. So a very smart entrepreneur of a fast-growing startup said this: in status-driven societies versus wealth-driven societies, it is hard to remove middlemen / brokers in large deals, as negotiating and bargaining are considered to be low-status behaviors. I would love to have your view on that. Thank you.
Ankit, I try to answer this on the chat box. I mean, middleman is not a bad guy at all. I mean, I don't think society today views middlemen or brokers or negotiators as bad people. All big four firms, all your top banks, they all negotiate and they all take brokerages. They all take commissions. And founders and the businessmen don't have time to do all these things. If it comes at a 1% cost, I think it's a great idea to go ahead and do it, 1 or 2% cost. Why would you waste your time, spend your time next 3 months? You'd rather spend your time on developing the product and get the idea on, off the ground and get to the market. So that's my simple answer. I mean, we shouldn't be worried about status here when we're doing a business.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have a question from Sankalp Bansal.
Okay, I'm going to keep it short and quick because of lack of time. So sure. One question, my first question is Saurabh. Saurabh, congratulations on what Kevinter has achieved so far. What made the Kevinter's franchise model so successful? There are a lot of brands that have tried franchising but have failed. So what made Kevinter so successful? And my second question is to the panelists in general. You end up funding a lot of companies or investing in a lot of companies, but how much importance do you give to the execution capability of the team? If you might put a crore into a startup, but if the founders don't have execution capability, then your money's gone. So how do you judge that parameter? And if yes, how do you judge it?
So should I go first? Quickly, yeah. It's a very brief answer. Why Keventus is successful is because the entire ethos and the entire model of Keventus was based on only one thing, that the franchisee should be able to make money. We worked backwards on the P&L for the franchisee P&L, and then made sure that we are able to give him something where the franchisee is able to take back home something substantial. Okay. Most of the other companies, when they look at a model, they just try to make a model which is company owned, successful running. I think there are two differences. You don't look at a company owned model, you look at a model for a franchise. So that's exactly what we've done. And we've always been true to that. And second is that why it's successful is because I told you, I mentioned in the beginning, is because we want to do something better. We have been able to establish through our marketing strategy an emotional connect with the audience. And the minute you are able to establish the emotional connect, whether it's bottles or whether it's marketing, you have a winner in ads. That's what is required. Emotional connect and engagement with the audience.
Thank you.
That's my brief. Otherwise, so it's a
we'll catch up offline otherwise.
Yeah. And the second question that Sankalp asked was, Sankalp, if you could rephrase that question once more, please.
Yeah, on the importance of figuring out the team's execution capabilities. How important
and how do you judge that as well?
Yeah.
So Neeraj and Rajat, whoever.
Neeraj is the guy.
Neeraj, why did you answer that?
Critical, guys, it's absolutely critical, and we've learned it. We have a lot of examples of this in our group. It's team is critical. Now, how do we judge it? I mean, see, great idea can fail if team is not committed to it. So there's no point having an idea or even POC and not take it to its logical conclusion. How do you judge it? I think it's very subjective. So we look at the person's experience, person's commitment by how much time he spent, ready to bootstrap or not. Is he building? Is he or she building assets first, or is it very well run and a bootstrap startup? Profile of the person. That if somebody who's very young and let's say first idea of the blog, yeah, I'm not saying a bad thing at all, but let's say one person, a 24-year-old, great idea and with no execution experience at all, would be a more risky proposition than three people in their mid-30s who've done 10 years of work in the field and now hit upon an idea. And their commitment to the venture, and they have interdependence upon each other, would be higher, we will feel, and then the risk would be lower. So it's a very judgmental thing here. And it's not that we've always succeeded. We've failed and we've also succeeded. We have both examples in front of us. Very, very good idea, which we failed because we just found that this young founder could not sustain more than 2 years. And so, I've tried my best. I couldn't succeed, so I'm going to go and pick up a job. Now my parents are pressurizing me. No, that's a living example we have.
Right.
Thank you. So we are already 3 minutes over time. We're just trying to wrap up the meeting in the next 5 minutes, and we have a quick question by Mr. Amit Bajaj. Amit, please come into the. Please just share your question with us.
Yeah. So hi, my name is Amit Bajaj. I run a logistics and supply chain company. So my question is, we're talking more about the investment side of it and the investor side of it, right? The first question about basics is, what are the basic characters you find you want to invest in a business in, right? The person, yes, the entrepreneur, yes, but what are the basic characters of the business itself? Because what we got to know, one was the people talked about a network effect, then the other, they talked about a scalability. Now, scalability in domestic market or scalability in global market, how would you, insight into that? Thanks.
So let me try and sort of articulate this the way I look. I think the first thing we look at beyond idea and so on is integrity. I think integrity is absolutely key. And again, this is subjective. The second thing Neeraj emphasized a lot is on execution. It is not about domestic or international or whatever. It is basically, what is the vision you're putting on the table? And do you have the ability to execute that vision? And is that vision translating into a business plan which is sensible with reasonable assumptions? And have you executed a part of that business plan, the initial part, to show that you have the capability? I think that's what somebody would look at fundamentally.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Very quick closing remarks from our panelists before we end the meeting. And Sameer, why don't you just go first? Like very quick, 20, 30-second closing remarks.
Sameer is mute.
Yep.
Sorry, I missed you. I just missed you.
Yeah, I was just asking, like, we're now closing the discussion. Just very quick closing remarks. Any word of advice to people who are looking for funding, entrepreneurs? Very quick, 20 to 30 seconds closing remarks from takeaways, or any advice that you would want to give on to.
I think from an entrepreneurship point of view, I think today is a great time. India is a great country to be in. We have a lot of problems to fix, and I always keep on saying, whenever you get into a new area and opportunity, we find tremendous opportunities for young, bright people to do something worthwhile. I also feel there's a lot of money there. The question is, I think it's really about the money, right? Finding the right idea and the right set of people. So if people work, believe in themselves, believe in their idea, are willing to work hard. I think the point Neeraj raised about the fact that you have to create the right deck, the right story. You have to make the right pitch. I think the next few years is going to be great from an entrepreneurship point of view. And I think the key learnings would be that if you're starting off your business, I think we talked about the skin in the game. That's an important piece. But funding to me is an important ingredient if you want to scale at some point of time. And so all the best to people who are looking at kicking off something on their own in the coming few months.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for participating in this debate, Sameer, and sharing your valuable perspectives. Neeraj, quick closing remarks from you.
Funding is not a bad idea at all. Funding is good, number one. Let's not say that funding is a problem. Funding is a good idea. Start small, start with equity funding, first own and then external. And then when you're a little more profitable and have a positive cash flow, go debt. That's how the funding should evolve.
Rajat.
So yeah, I think Sameer made some good points about solving a real problem and base your business on solving a real problem. But once you have an idea, I have seen a lot of entrepreneurs go out and execute the idea. I think validate the idea through a process. Once you validate it, then you do what Neeraj said, but only add one more ingredient to it, which is what the Western world does beautifully, and that is why their mortality rates are so much lower, is get a strong mentor with you who has been there, done that, who's able to guide you through those blind bends, because he can perhaps see what's coming, which right. You may not. And then everything else that Neeraj and Sameer said applies.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And last but not the least, Saurabh, closing remarks from your end.
No, very simple. Yeah, I would encourage, today is the time, everybody should try their hand at entrepreneurship. I think we're quite blessed because there's so many angel investors, other investors available. And it's the time of our lives, yeah. I mean, I wish I was born maybe. But the point is that it's a great opportunity and we have wonderful people here. So, and I would highly encourage entrepreneurship because it's time to control your destiny. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to work for somebody else. And remember that, yeah, normally we hear people saying, "Arey, yaar, my work has become, my life is just my work." So this is an opportunity for you to make your work a part of your life and pursue your other interests also. I'm not saying don't work hard, but this is an excellent opportunity to live your life. And I would recommend entrepreneurship over anything else. And just be confident. And like I said, have the confidence is key. So practice where confidence is concerned. And also practice your negotiation skills. You're really going to need them. Because if you can do them, you're a winner. All out. This is a great opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Kanchan, just if you could share the vote of thanks with the esteemed panelists.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for being so patient and for listening to us, and especially to our panelists who've given us this fabulous insight and guided us with their experiences and views. And helped us get through this confounding days of the process of how we should be growing our businesses, scaling our businesses. What should we do if we have an idea? How do we execute? Should we take funding? Should we not take funding? Well, a lot of insight that has gone in, and there is going to be a lot of thought process that we will all be looking into and thinking and reflecting as to how we should be doing. But great insights, and thank you very much. And thank you everyone for participating in this Reciprocity Alchemy. At this point, I would also like to add that should you be keen to know more about Reciprocity, we would be glad to extend an invite for you to attend one of our meetings. please feel free to reach out to us at any of our social media handles, the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn, and we'll be glad to send you an invite. Thank you, everyone, especially all our audience, the panelists, Neeraj, Saurabh, Rajat, Samir, thank you so much for being with us, and look forward to connecting with you. And to everybody else, look out for the next Alchemy session next month. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you to everyone.